Evidence of a more temporal form exists for those whose tastes are more technical. This evidence involves the manner in which ancient civilizations rose and fell. It also involves what and how much ancient man knew and when he came to know it. Ancient man, predictably, attributed their knowledge to the teachings of the gods. To modern scholars, this explanation as to where ancient man received his knowledge of architecture, agriculture, and astronomy is largely unsatisfactory. But it appears that the ancients' explanation was no more of a cop-out than the explanations of today's university scholars who label everything that doesn't exist within their theory as a mystery. When it comes to the more tangible forms of evidence, Mayan pyramids. Although thousands of miles away and built thousands of years later, are said to have been built by the same method and for the same purpose as the pyramids in Egypt. The Mayan people of southern Mexico and Guatemala say that their pyramids were built by beings with magical powers and that all they had to do was whistle and the heavy rocks would move into place. The Incan people far south of the Mayans claim that the massive stones used to build their great structures was carried through the air to the sound of a trumpet. The Mayan traditions state that their pyramids were where men became gods and the place where gods are made. Curious that these far-flung civilizations would suggest that their pyramids were built the same way and for the same reason. The pyramid as a symbol of transformation and rebirth survives to this day. Universe has proven to be quite the onion. Its simple exterior betrays the senses. What science has called truths of the universe is in fact an ever-changing list of theories, each being no more than shades of grey, closer to truth than the last. This is not, however, saying that anything but the ultimate truth is useless. Our list of ignorance is great, but our achievements using the half-truths is also great. Our knowledge of an electron, for example, is far from complete, and yet it didn't stop us from harnessing its power and using it as a source of energy and communication. As stated at the beginning of the book, the whole truth requires the mind of God, but it doesn't mean that we can't make application of half-truths. Even this text is nothing more than a long list of half-truths. But as its author, I'm comforted by the fact that everything else you've ever read is likewise. Even books you believe to be inspired by God are subject to your interpretation, which you could never be 100% sure about and can never prove conclusively. No scientist understands this better than quantum physicists. Unlike the elegant equations of Einstein and Newton, these poor bastards are knee-deep in hideous equations that are so hideous they couldn't possibly describe the universe, and at best only describe what the universe is likely to do, not what it absolutely will do. Quantum mechanics or quantum physics is a branch of physics that concerns itself with the smallest particles and spaces in the universe. As it turns out, the subatomic world is not what we expected. Traditionally, extremely small particles like electrons were thought of as tiny billiard balls bouncing off of each other at mathematically predictable angles. Like billiard balls, their location, direction, and speed could be easily measured. On a subatomic level, particles exhibit strange properties and behaviors. Sometimes particles would seem to disappear and reappear on the other side of a wall that, mathematically speaking, should have been impossible to penetrate. Other times, particles will seem to dance between the state of being a particle and being a wave. And measuring the subatomic world is also different, because in order to measure things like speed, location, and direction, one must build a sensor that interacts with the subatomic particle, thereby changing the course of destiny. Surely these poor scientists are frustrated by particles that always do something different just because they're not watching. It was once a philosophical question as to whether it was possible to break a stone into infinitely small pieces. Scientists and philosophers would speculate over the existence of an elementary particle, a particle that could not be broke apart and represented the fundamental building blocks of the universe. This continued until evidence emerged that the universe was indeed made of unbreakable fundamental particles, and these particles were called atoms. It would later be discovered that these particles weren't unbreakable and were in fact composed of even smaller particles dubbed subatomic, and included the proton, electron, and neutron. Later still, it was discovered that even these particles were in fact composed of even smaller particles called quarks that appeared to be where the dividing stopped. Regardless of whether these quarks are indeed the smallest particles, scientists have been forced to conclude that the universe is made out of some kind of elementary particle. But the subatomic world wasn't done violating the rational mind of these poor researchers. As it turns out, even the nature of space and time had its peculiarities. Space and time were thought of as mediums that these elementary particles existed in. And up until the beginning of the 20th century, scientists were spared the grief of having to think of time and space as particles. But eventually came the day when scientists were forced to ponder nearly the same question that had plagued them centuries. Insult to injury, scientists are still unable to gracefully unify the separate forces of nature, gravity, magnetism, and the nuclear forces. These forces, once exclusively thought of as curves in space, are now spoke of in terms of particles as well, gravitons, photons, etc. Einstein envisioned gravity as no more than a warping in the shape of space that large objects create by their presence alone. Like a bowling ball placed at the center of a trampoline, a marble rolling on the surface of the trampoline will appear to be drawn to the bowling ball, though it appears that the bowling ball has some kind of gravitational hold on the marble. The marble is only responding to the curvature of the trampoline fabric created by the bowling ball. As a result, the marble will begin to orbit the bowling ball in the center, as a planet orbits a star. Today, quantum physicists speak of gravity as a real particle, a graviton created by the bowling ball and felt by the marble, slowly drawing the marble closer to the bowling ball. I agree with Einstein's model as opposed to the graviton model because of how elegantly it explains changes in the passage of time and the complete lack of quote-unquote gravitational shadows. Even the Bible makes reference to the fabric of space. Countless Bible passages speak of the heavens as a fabric that can be stretched, torn and folded in on itself. Been the result of all this quantum confusion? Confusion. From its beginning, quantum mechanics has been a duct-tape science constantly patching holes rather than starting from a fundamentally sound model of the universe. Today, the quantum physicist claims that first may not even know the true location, state and speed of a particle. Consequently, they believe that the universe is loaded with random numbers and therefore, like people, you may only know what the particle is likely to do, not what it will do. That's not science, that's superstition. The universe has proven itself to be mathematically perfect so far. And why would the world of the very small be any different? And where are these random numbers coming from anyway? The gods, a computer programmer knows a computer can't actually produce a random number, but instead can produce a series of numbers that appear random. Ancient man may have mistaken the locations of lightning strikes as being random, but the places lightning chooses to strike was never random. A fact we came to discover after we understood the nature of electricity. Ancient man may have mistaken storms and earthquakes as random and perhaps angry gods, but the meteorologist and geologist knows better at the latter part of his life. The greater scientific community considered Einstein washed up and obsolete because he simply refused to accept the idea that the universe is in any way random, stating emphatically, God doesn't play dice. While the rest of the world accepted the universe's mystical nature, Einstein went to his deathbed trying to reconcile the microscopic and macroscopic worlds in his heart. He knew that the truth of this apparent randomness was out there and was probably as elegant as equals, MC squared. Maybe Einstein would have done well by considering more than 4 dimensions in his deathbed equations. The missing ingredient between apparent chaos and order is the number of spatial dimensions. These quantum physicists are taking into consideration. Perhaps the real question is how many angles are there for the greater part of the age of science? The number of dimensions was thought to be for the first X representing width, the second was Y representing height, the third was Z representing depth, and the fourth was T representing time. Initially, it was thought that every object in the universe experienced time equally, but later it was discovered that time was just another direction of motion, which meant that tomorrow and yesterday are no different than left-right, up and down, with time being just another direction to move in, and with every object in the universe moving in different speeds and directions. Naturally, every object in the universe was experiencing time differently. The effect that becomes quite measurable when considering things that are moving at high speeds is called time dilation. This means that if you were to ask every subatomic particle in the universe how old the universe is, each would produce a slightly different answer. Better understand dimensions, one must only envision the relationship between a boat and a submarine. The boat lives in a two-dimensional world and its only choices are north, south, east and west. South is only the opposite of north and east is only the opposite of west. So in reality, a boat has only two angles of freedom. What's more is that other boats may not share the same space with each other. A submarine, on the other hand, exists in a three-dimensional world like the boat. It can move north, south, east and west. But unlike the boat, it can also move up and down. The air above is also a three-dimensional space. A human not being able to fly has access to two dimensions and can only walk along the surface of the earth. A large wall, a river or tall cliffs can spell the end of a journey on foot. But a bird has access to another dimension up and down. It would not be impeded by a wall or river, having access to another dimension.